let's dig into the very top of this conversation. And I'm not going based on some recruiting ranking or some list. If we're talking about the most dramatic elements going into National Signing Day, how could the conversation not begin with Jaden Rashada? By now, you have heard plenty of the Pittsburgh, California native and blue chip quarterback recruit. One time Miami commitment, one time Florida commitment, signs with Florida in December, and now infamously, I would say, backs off of that national letter of intent and requests a release from the University of Florida, which was granted. Now, the why, that's for y'all to decide. That's for y'all to dig into. NIL was a part of it. There's no doubt that NIL was a part of it. But I would say, again, as we've talked about on previous shows, had more to do with the adults than Jaden Rashada himself on both sides of this thing. The Rashada camp and certainly from the University of Florida perspective. But either way, he's been released from that national letter of intent, and he's had a couple of weekends to take some visits and reestablish what his future in college football could look like. And what's interesting about this Rashada situation is that the previous contenders, as he was going into that summer decision, June, July decision, initially when he picked Miami, those contenders are all out of the mix. None of those programs have a fighting chance today, as far as we understand, for Rashada based on his visits. Now, schools have kicked the tires, right? Washington, Colorado with Deion Sanders, South Carolina has reportedly made a few phone calls. But in terms of the contenders, Rashada was considering, of course, Miami, Florida, LSU, Texas A&M, Cal, and some others. But the schools that he's actually looking at right now, going into the month of February, are the last two he's visited. He was at Arizona State 2 weekends ago, and he was at TCU this past weekend. Both schools in need of a quarterback prospect in the class of 2023. Both schools looking for new starters heading into the fall of 2023. And of course, both schools under relatively new management. Kenny Dillingham, brand new, newly hired head coach at Arizona State. Sonny Dykes coming off of year one at TCU. And what a year one it was, of course, rolling all the way to the national championship. So Jaden Rashada took in both of these visits, and there is similar buzz, I would say, coming out of ASU and TCU. Now, I think from a relationship standpoint, there's an advantage towards Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham was one of the offensive coordinators he connected with most throughout his recruitment. Dillingham was, of course, at Oregon during the 2022 season and had a heck of a run in quarterback recruiting, right? They landed Dante Moore, the number one quarterback in the country, for my fake dollars. But Jaden Rashada was absolutely in that conversation, and the Ducks were high on his list at one point. So that relationship with Dillingham is well established, and they got to rekindle it, refresh it, revitalize it at Arizona State, where, look, it's a total overhaul. It is certainly a starting from nothing concept, right? All of the issues with the NCAA and violations under Herm Edwards, and then an on-field product that left a lot to be desired for a team in Arizona. And of course, just the roster turnover that comes with it, total overhaul in that type of situation. But look, Jaden was committed to Miami before Mario Cristobal coached his first game, and he flipped to Florida before Billy Napier's first season came to a conclusion. So Jaden has long shown that he is willing and ready to deal with a turnaround, a rebuild, a rebrand, whatever you want to call it. He is willing to dig his heels in that regard. So Arizona State offers that connection to Dillingham, a modern offense that Rashada fits pretty well, I would say, as a big-time arm and a big-time pocket passer with mobility. But then TCU offers something different, right? This is a ready-made program where Jaden will surely sit. And look, Rashada will sit at Arizona State. They brought in Drew Pine from Notre Dame in the transfer portal, so most likely the job is his. At TCU, he would definitely sit as well, right? Because Chandler Morris was the quarterback one before Max Duggan took over in 2022. A lot of folks don't remember that Duggan lost that quarterback battle this time last year, and he was QB2 coming out of camp. And of course, Morris gets hurt. Duggan takes the gig and runs away with it thereafter. So now Morris is back at QB1 for Sonny Dykes. Great fit there, and TCU is expected to at least remain relatively similar offensively in scheme. Not so much in personnel, right? Duggan, Johnston, those guys are gone. I think even Keandre Miller declared for the NFL draft. So it will look and feel very different in TCU. But again, a good quarterback friendly system for Jaden Rashada. And they've got the recency bias, right? It was the most recent trip Jaden took. We know in that original verbal commitment, there was a lot of Florida buzz. He pushes his recruitment back a week, visits Miami, and Miami ended up being the school that won out for his initial verbal commitment. So in this scenario, every visit and the most recent visit has some credence. So I think TCU has a slight edge over Arizona State going into this, and obviously from a program standpoint, it's been proven what Sonny Dykes can do there. It's stable. The talent, the level of talent going to Fort Worth is simply stronger than Arizona, although the quantity going to Arizona State is massive. They've got the biggest transfer class in America at last check. So it'll feel and look very different at ASU beyond that new and assembled coaching staff. Here's the other thing with Rashada, though, the timeline. Is he 100% coming off the board on signing day? He's already made one signature. That's the other X factor in this thing. If he delays, can Colorado or South Carolina or one of these other schools that has reportedly reached out, maybe Washington, could they become involved for Jaden Rashada later rather than sooner? Because if you're Jaden, what's the rush? You're done with high school. You were expected to enroll at Florida the first week of January. So you're done with high school. You've got time to make this decision, and there might not be any rush. There's certainly no other high school quarterback that can match Jaden from a talent perspective that is still also uncommitted and unsigned, unless somebody else, of course, asks out of their national letter of intent. So Jaden Rashada very much in the news and our starting point today on the state of recruiting.